Hello everyone, welcome to the Morrowind Book Club. Today, I'm gonna do something I really hate doing. I hate reading things out of order. I like having things, start with number 1 and 2, but I found this book here, Bone, Part 2, and I don't think I found Bone, Part 1 anywhere. And since I have to, I've decided, I have dedicated myself to reading all the books within this library before I leave. I guess I've got to read this one here without reading the first part. And at some point when I get the first part, well, then I'll be able to go ahead and record that one, and then we will have the full story. But for now, Bone, Part 2. And we've gained knowledge from this book. Our medium armor increased to 7. A whopping 7. Yes! Alright. Let me see here. Bone, Part 2 by Tavi Dromio. What do you mean the story gets more appalling? Garaz was incredulous. How in Boethiah's name could it get more appalling? It's a ruse, Xiomara scoffed, ordering 2 more mugs of grief and a glass of Flynn for Garaz. How much worse can a tale get, which prominently features cannibalism, abuse of slaves, and the regular placement of rotting animal carcasses? Don't you dare me, growled Halgerd, annoyed by his listeners' lack of appreciation of his prose styling. Remind me where we were. Arslick Owen is the owner of a stronghold under siege by savage cannibalistic Nords, said Xiomara, keeping a straight face. After a lot of deaths and several unsuccessful attempts to get water, he had his armorer, with the unlikely name of Gorkith, outfit his slaves with the first ever bone mold armor. One of them finally makes it back with some water. Interesting. So this is this is where we got our point for medium armor. Okay, the bone mold armor is medium, so I could already sort of see where it's coming from. I love that it's doing a bit sort of a recap of what was we'll say talked about in the first part. At least I'm assuming that's what's happening. So that's kind of cool. I'm gonna be really disappointed if there is no part 1. But at the same time, I'm going to be kind of excited because, like, that's kind of a cool idea that they would put a part 2 out into the world, but, like, there is no part 1. It's been lost. Anyways, it was only 1 jar full of water, said Halgerd, pulling back in his chair and continuing the tale. And Arslick Own drank most of it, passing the remains to his dear armorer Gorkith, and the last dribbles to the few dozen slaves who still lived. It was hardly enough to sustain health and well-being. Another expedition was necessary, but they had only 1 suit of bone mold left, as there was only 1 survivor of the trip. 1 out of 18 slaves made it through the gauntlet of Nords wearing that marvelous bone mold armor of yours, said Arslick Own to Gorkith. And 1 can only carry back enough water for 1. Therefore, mathematically, as we have counting you and me, 56 remaining people at the stronghold, we need armor for 54. Since we already have 1, you only need to make 53 to make the total. That way, 3 will make it back, with enough water for you and me and whoever's in the best condition to partake. I don't know what we'll do after that, but if we wait, we won't have enough slaves to fetch even a couple days worth of water. I understand, whimpered Gorkith, but how am I going to make the armor? I used all the livestock bones to make the first batch of bone mold. Arslick Own gave an order which Gorkith fearfully complied with. In 18 hours. What do you mean, Arslick Own gave an order which Gorkith fearfully complied with? Asked Xiomara. What was the order? All will be clear, smiled Halgerd. I have to choose what to reveal and what to conceal. Such is the way of the tale teller. In 18 hours, Gorkith had 53 suits of bone mail. Wait, what? Isn't it bone mold? No, maybe it's actually bone mail. Okay, whatever. Said Halgerd, continuing, not really minding the interruption. Prepared for the slaves, sorry. Without prompting, he ordered the slaves to practice using the armor, and even allowed them more training time than their predecessors. They not only learned how to move and stop quickly in bone mold, but how to adjust their peripheral vision to see a blow before it came, and to sway to dodge, and where the sturdiest reinforcement points on the arm were, the center of the chest and the abdomen, and how to position themselves to take blows there, against their natural instincts. The slaves even had time for a mock battle before being sent out among the cannibals. So this is where we got our skill point from. The slaves handled themselves admirably. Very few, just 15 slaves, were killed and eaten outright. Oh, that's great. Only 10 were killed and eaten when they reached the river. That was when things did not go according to Arslic's Own's plans. 21 slaves, with jars of water, took off for the hills. Only 8 returned to the castle, largely because they were blocked by the cannibal Nords. It was a larger percentage than he had anticipated surviving, but Arslic Own felt righteous indignation at the paucity of loyalty. Paucity. I had to look it up. Paucity, the presence of something only in small or insufficient quantities or amounts, or scarcity. So basically, he felt righteous indignation at the lack of loyalty. Are you absolutely certain you wouldn't rather flee? He hollered from the battlements. Finally, he allowed the survivors in. 3 had been killed waiting for the gate to open. 2 more died almost upon stepping into the courtyard, and 1 was delirious, walking around in circles, laughing and dancing before suddenly collapsing. That meant 5 jars of water for 4 people. The 2 surviving slaves. Arslic, Own, and Gorkith. As the lord of the manor, Arslic Own took the extra jar, but he was democratic with the others. You are quite correct, frowned Garaz. The story is getting more and more appalling. Just wait, smiled Halgerd. The next morning, Halgerd continued. Halgerd continued. I put the inflection on the wrong part. Whatever. Arslic Own awoke to a perfectly still and quiet stronghold. There was no murmurings in the corridors, no sound of hard labor in the courtyard. He dressed and surveyed the scene. It appeared that the fortress was utterly deserted. Arslic Own walked down to the armorer's quarters, but the door was locked. Open up, said Arslic Own patiently. We need to speak. 30 out of 54 slaves successfully made it to the river and gathered water. Admittedly, some then fled, and a couple didn't survive because I needed to correct their fickleness. But mathematically, that's a 55% survival rate. If you and I and the 2 remaining slaves made the next run to the river, we too should survive. Zillion and Jello, left last night with their armor, cried Gorklith through the door. Who are Zillion and Jello? The 2 remaining slaves? They don't remain anymore. That's vexing, said Arslic Own. Still, we must continue on. Mathematically. I heard something last night, whimpered Gorklith in a funny voice. Like footsteps, only different. And they were moving through the walls. And there were voices too. They sounded strange, like they couldn't move their jaws very well. But I knew one. Arslic Own sighed, humoring his poor armor. And who was it? Ponic. And who is Ponic? One of the slaves that died when the Nords poisoned our water. One of the many, many slaves that died, and we made use of. He was always a nice, uncomplaining fellow. That's why I noticed his voice above all the others. Gorklith began to sob. I understood what he was saying. Which was what? Asked Arslic Own with a sigh. Give me back my bones! Gorklith's voice shrieked. There was silence for a moment, and then more hysterical sobbing. I saw that coming, laughed Xiomara. There was nothing more to be done with the armorer, for the time being, said Halgerd, a trifle annoyed at the regular interruptions. So Arslic Own stripped one of the dead slaves of his suit of bone mold and put it on. He practiced in the courtyard, impressing himself with his natural comfortably with medium weight armor. Okay, he practiced in the courtyard, impressing himself with his natural comfortably with medium weight armor. This sentence makes no sense to me. I get the general idea though. For hours he boxed fainted, dodged, sprinted, skipped, jumped, and generally cavorted about. When he felt tired, he retired to the shade and took a nap. The sound of the king's trumpet woke him with a start. Night had fallen, and for a moment he thought he had been dreaming. Then the alarum sounded again. Alarum? Or is it the alarm? You know, this brings up the question. If these books were written by hand, why are there typos? Like, this... It's not the typo itself that's taking me out of the experience. It's not the typo itself that makes me go, oh, broke my immersion. No, it's the idea that a handwritten book shouldn't have this kind of typo. But then again, I have done stuff like that. If you're gonna do that, at least have like a line scribbling out one of the wrong letters. Yeah, make like regular pen corrections. That's how it should be done. I'm just being a butt. Just ignore me. The alarm sounded again, far in the distance, but clear. Arslic Own leapt to his feet and ran to the ramparts. Several miles away, he could see the emissaries and their vast and well-armed escort approach. They were there early. The cannibal Nords below looked at one another with consternation. Savages they might be, but they knew when a superior force was approaching. Arslic Own joyously dashed down the stairs to Gorklith's chamber. The door was still locked. He beat on it, cajoling, demanding, threatening. Finally, he found a key, one of the few scraps of metal that had not been smelted days before. Gorklith appeared to be sleeping, but as Arslic Own approached, he noticed that the armorer's mouth and eyes were wide open and his arms were folded unnaturally behind his back. On closer inspection, the armorer was obviously dead. What was more, his face and whole body were sunken like an empty pig's bladder. Something moved through the walls, like a footfall, only squishy. Arslic Own expertly and gracefully turned to face it, completely in balance. At first it seemed like nothing more than a bubble expanding through one of the cracks in the stone. As more of the flesh-colored, gelatinous matter emerged, it more clearly resembled part of a face. A flaccid, almost shapeless face, with a low brow and a slack, toothless jaw. The rest of the body oozed out of the crack, a soft bag of muscle and blood. Behind Arslic Own and to the side there was more movement, more slaves welling up through the cracks in the stone. They were all around him, reaching out. "Give us," moaned Ponic, his tongue rolling about his hanging jaw. "Give us back our bones." Arslic Own began to rip off his bone mold, throwing it to the floor. 100 figures more pooled into the small chamber. "That's not enough." The cannibals had cleared away. By the time the king's emissaries arrived at Arslic Own's gates, they had not been looking forward to this visit. It was best, they philosophically thought, to begin with the worst of the king's noblemen. So to end their trip well, they sounded the alarum. Oh, maybe it wasn't a typo once again, but the gates did not open. There was no sound from Arslic Own's stronghold. All right, fun fact: alarum is an archaic term meaning alarm. So that is it's an old word, and if we're going with the understanding that Morrowind is an old-timey time. It's a fantasy / medieval type setting, then, maybe a word like alarum would be used regularly there. So, all right, I stand corrected. The word is not a typo. I'm just a butt, as we established earlier in this video. So, yeah, that's fine. It took a few hours to gain access. If the emissaries had not brought a professional acrobat with them for entertainment, it might have taken longer. The place seemed to be abandoned. They searched every room until finally they came to the armorer's. There they found the master of the manor, folded neatly, legs behind his head, arms behind the legs, like a fine gown, not a bone in his body. "The first part of your story was complete nonsense," cried Xiomara. "But now it doesn't hold true on any level. How could bone mold be made again if the armorer who invented it died before he could tell anyone how he did it?" I said that this was the first time it was created, not the first time people learned the craft. "And when did someone first teach someone else the craft?" asked Garaz. "That my friends, replied Halgerd with a sinister smile, is a tale for another night. I gotta find Bone Part 1. I feel like I'm missing something here. I will definitely want to revisit the story once I find Part 1. I don't think I've ever found Part 1, but I'm definitely going to be on the lookout for it. That was an interesting, very interesting, weird, strange, but cool read. I had fun with that. What did you think of it? Did you think it was good? Give it a thumbs up. And, well, I guess you can't give the book a thumbs up. You can give my video a thumbs up. Yeah, and I'll pass it along. I'll pass it along to the book. I'll pass the compliment on to the book. If you didn't like the book, give it a thumbs down. Yeah, just like I said, it's okay if you put it on my video. I'll make sure that the book sees it. Either way, let me know what you thought in the comment section. And until next time, I'd like to ask you all to game on.